Everyone, and welcome to this special situation report from the presidential election show. Welcome, of course, all our regular viewers. Thanks for tuning in today. A very special program this morning. In particular, it's great to be able to welcome back the in-house US politics expert from Brussels, Ryan Hunter. Welcome back on the show, Ryan.
Hi, Mark. Thank you.
Good to see you. I know you've been up through the night now, a couple of nights. It's still going on, but I think you've got some important news for us that you want to break with our viewers to give us an update, particularly from those key states. There's been a lot going on in the states overnight, not much of it in the mainstream media though. So maybe take us through maybe the big the big headline, and then maybe take us through state by state what's going on.
Mm-hmm. That's a good question, Mark. So it's a lot has been happening over the last 24 hours in terms of the outstanding states trying to get their final votes counted. In most cases, the outstanding vote are mail-in ballots, a lot of them from metropolitan areas. And what that's been creating is a situation where in most states, Donald Trump has a lead that has been shrinking as the mail-in ballots get counted and announced. And over the last, I'd say, hour or so, Joe Biden has just taken the lead in Georgia, which is very big news, as no Democrat has won Georgia since Bill Clinton. And the last time a non-Southern Democrat won Georgia was JFK. So this is pretty big stuff, and it is the work of a lot of behind-the-scenes work by people like Stacey Abrams, who lost the governor race 2 years ago, trying to get more people to turn out. And this is the evidence of that. Now, Georgia, Joe Biden's lead is about 917 votes, very slim, but the expectation is that the remaining votes will also be swinging in Joe Biden's direction. So hard to see Trump reclaiming that lead. Now, of course, the outstanding vote is still bigger than the margin, and Georgia's recount rules would say that if it's within 0.5%, a recount can be requested, and by all accounts, we're going to be ending somewhere in that margin. And so the other states that we're waiting for with great anticipation are Pennsylvania, where Joe Biden is, like Georgia, clawing back against Trump's lead. He hasn't taken the lead yet. The expectation is that sometime this morning, U.S. time, which would be early afternoon here in Europe, Joe Biden might take the lead in Pennsylvania as more votes come in. Whether the networks call the state and the race at that stage remains to be seen, bearing in mind that if Joe Biden wins Pennsylvania, the race is over. And if he wins Georgia, he still has to win something else. So Pennsylvania could be a very important call today. And then you get onto, well, North Carolina as well in the East Coast. The expectation is that Trump will win that state. Then you get to the West Coast and you have the states like Nevada and Arizona. Nevada is another case where Joe Biden is a case where Joe Biden's been leading and Trump has been clawing back his lead. It looks very tight there, and in Arizona as well. So I don't know when we'll get any updates from the West Coast states. Nevada last published numbers yesterday morning their time, yesterday afternoon here. The expectation is that they'll do the same thing again, which means that we can expect more results around 4 p.m. Brussels time from Nevada, by which stage the race might already be over. So let's see what we get first from Pennsylvania and Georgia, and if needed, let's see what we get from the West Coast states.
Okay, some very key numbers there, key timings there. Looks like early afternoon Europe time, Ryan. We might really know that the networks may not call it and the states may not call it, but effectively will know. The LP Brussels election show will know who's won. Just to summarize there, I mean, just to take you through, you started off obviously with that big news in Georgia, Biden taking a lead at 917. Obviously, he's got those solid leads already in the bag. Let's not forget that. Michigan looking very good now. Wisconsin looking pretty solid. He's still on 47,000 lead in Arizona. As you say, we'll hear more today, and likewise in Nevada, a narrow lead, but it looks pretty solid. Pennsylvania, he's down 18,000 on the latest count, but as you say, Ryan, look at the results coming through in the next few hours. Early afternoon, you think that'll be tipping over into Biden territory. Is that a good summary of what you've just said?
Yes, it is. The one of the states with a few more question marks is Arizona, of course, where in the mail-in ballots, Trump has been outperforming what he's been doing in other states, and so the margin of what's coming in hasn't been so heavily skewed in Biden's favor as in other states. So Arizona, it's tough to make any prediction at this stage. Of course, Fox News and the AP already called Arizona on election night for Joe Biden, which was, by all accounts, very premature call. Democrats are still very confident in Arizona, but just looking at the state of the race in Georgia and Pennsylvania, if you're Joe Biden, you're sitting very, very comfortably today, just waiting for the moment. It's not a question of if right now. For him, it seems more like a question of when the race gets called for him.
Well, indeed, and I think you're saying you'll be able to call that in the next few hours based on the numbers that you're seeing in the states. And in fact, if we just come on to the difference between forecast recounts and legal battles, I think that's the next thing we're going to be encountering. Clearly, some of these numbers are still forecasts. I mean, they are accurate, but they are still perhaps open to interpretation or clarification. Maybe you want to comment on that. Some of them are subject to recount. Some of the states have recount requirements, and some, of course, contenders can demand a recount, and that could be Biden or Trump, of course. And some, of course, can be subject to legal battles. I mean, indeed, many of them are subject to legal battles. So again, without going through them all, I mean, how confident are you that your forecast for this afternoon will stand, bearing in mind at least those three areas of uncertainty?
That's very important to distinguish between what we're talking about here. These are, in many cases, the states that have been announced are projections, right? The states have yet to certify their results officially. Some states have shorter deadlines. Some states have until the end of the month to certify. What does certify mean? Is when they can officially state they've counted every single vote. It's the deadline they have to count every vote, and at which point they will certify the results and they'll be official. So for the time being, when you open your New York Times website, your CNNs, and you're seeing these numbers and states that have been called, these are projections. So that nothing is certain yet, although they're using the math to be able to make them. So they're not guesses. It's very they seem pretty sure themselves on this.
These figures we have here, just to be absolutely clear, Ryan, these figures we have here, they're not predictions, but so they're not forecasts, they're not the actual numbers, but they are projections. Probably pretty reliable, but they haven't been legally verified. So I think that's important for our viewers to differentiate. These are not us trying to predict the result. These are the projections of the result based on the states, but still subject to legal verification. Would you say that's what the status of these figures below?
Well, I guess legal verification in the sense that the state will be declaring their vote certified. Some states will have legal battles, as we'll get onto, but yes. And that's because in some states you have more votes coming in. North Carolina has votes coming in until the 12th of November, as long as they're postmarked by Election Day. And then you have military ballots coming into big states like Georgia, for sure, and provisional ballots. If you turned up on Election Day and there was a small issue, your address didn't match, maybe you had an ID issue, you cast a provisional ballot, which would be counted, subject to fixing that error that was identified. And states would also be spending time getting in touch with those voters to make sure that vote does get counted, if it can be counted.
Yeah. And then moving on to those legal battles, Ryan, I mean, they've already started, of course. They could continue for the coming weeks, if not beyond. Do you want to just very briefly walk us through how much power rests in the hands of, as Donald Trump, the president last night, put it, how much power rests in the hands of the judges? Is this race ultimately up to the judges to decide?
Well, Donald Trump would hope so, and ultimately he'd hope the Supreme Court gets involved. But we've seen the Supreme Court has been unwilling to intervene in some of these election matters in the states. As we've been saying before, if you're looking at the U.S. as one election, that's a mistake. It's 50. It's each state has their own intricacies. Each state has some of their own rules. And so the Supreme Court has sort of taken a bit of a step back in terms of intervening there. But then you have the state courts, right? These have been getting more involved, certainly in the recent days. And some of the legal challenges from the Trump campaign have been regarding requests to stop the counting, have been, putting in place the challenges to the actual election in those states. They've been trying to submit evidence, they would say, of irregularities, certainly in Pennsylvania, in Nevada as well, Arizona, Wisconsin, and Michigan. And in Georgia, some of their cases were already dismissed. In Michigan, their request to stop the vote counting was dismissed. So far, it's not looking very good. If Trump is relying on the courts to settle this, it's hard to see him being successful, especially as a lot of the so-called evidence that they're putting forward are A, anecdotal, and B, have been investigated in most cases, if not all cases, by the Secretary of State in each of the states that are in question, and have been found to not been verifiable. That's a big problem for the Trump campaign, and it does look quite desperate at this stage, especially as the way the trend is going in the states looks a very desperate last-ditch attempt to hold on to power.
Okay, well, we'll just perhaps run through for the final time. I know some of the numbers are actually changing as we're broadcasting this live, but you're still confident that these numbers are actually not just a prediction, but the projection, not just a prediction, but a projection, and that they will probably stand. And of course, Pennsylvania, you're saying, predicting will switch this afternoon into Biden territory. And almost there's no pathway now for Trump to win if these figures stand in the next few hours, bearing in mind what you said, of course, about the legal battle.
So just to clarify, the numbers on the screen that everyone sees, these are real votes. These are actual votes that have been counted and have been declared, and votes are still being counted. So in terms of the numbers on the screen, those are not projections, but that when the media outlets are calling a race, that is a projection, of course, and it's based on vote numbers. It's based on where they know the rest of the vote is coming from. It's based on the number of outstanding votes. And so on and so forth, and the major outlets all have these big decision desks that take all these factors into account, and some of them are, CNN has been very cautious in their projections, of course. Some less so, like Fox News and the Associated Press, who've already called Arizona for Joe Biden a few days ago, even. So that's an important distinction to make. And as you say, if Joe Biden wins Georgia, as I would say looks likely at this stage, there is no path to 270 for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Full stop. There's no path. He could win Arizona, Nevada, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Alaska and get to 269, which I hope by now everyone knows would be one vote short. Whereas if Georgia goes to Joe Biden, he would already be on 269 and would therefore just need one more state to fall his way. Whereas Trump, just to avoid losing, needs to win all the states. And then at that stage, you have a tied race in the Electoral College, which it is possible. Very, very improbable, however. It seems super unlikely that Trump can win every single state left if he loses Georgia.
I think you've basically answered this question already by saying there really is no path now for Trump. But the concluding question on this program before we finish for now, and we'll be broadcasting live later today, I know. But on your decision desk, Ryan, at the LP Brussels decision desk, are you prepared at this stage to call the winner? Or are you going to wait a little bit till this afternoon, bearing in mind what you've said? It's up to you. You want to be the first person to call the election?
I mean, having followed this very, very closely since election day, you know, all the trends, every possible trend in every state bar Arizona looks so good for Joe Biden. He's taking the lead in Georgia. He's forecast to take the lead in Pennsylvania. I think the second he leads in Pennsylvania, we'll see the U.S. outlets call the state and the race. And so, you know, I've been very confident, even when the states were most of them were undeclared. You know, the blue wall is holding. Pennsylvania is looking very good. And so, if you're asking me to call the race, I would say yes. Joe Biden is looking the winner here. You know, and the Trump campaign is hoping for an act of God at this stage. They think that the courts can be that act of God. And let's not forget, yeah, Joe Biden will be declared winner today. I think there will be legal battles ahead, and we should, however, from a different point is yes, there are delays in the counting. Things have happened very late. A lot of that has been engineered by states that are in control of the Republican hands. You know, we shouldn't confuse delays for how close the race is. Like, look at Michigan, where Biden's lead is now 12 times what Trump won Michigan by, and yet, since it was so late in counting mail ballots, it gave the impression of a very tight race. Pennsylvania, you have people in the Democratic Party thinking Biden will end up winning by 80,000 votes plus. That's not ultimately all that close, right? Georgia will be close. North Carolina will be close.
The point you made previously on this show, which I think hasn't been stressed enough, is states like Pennsylvania legally could only be only allowed to start counting the mail-in ballots after the polls had shut. Unlike Florida, which got the result early, they were allowed to start counting before polling day. Yeah. In Pennsylvania, that simply wasn't a legal possibility, and that's why, as you say, what we're seeing now in the trend isn't so surprising. It's built in, it's wired in to the election law in that state. Isn't that right, Ryan? You tried to make this point repeatedly over the recent weeks. I know that partly you could predict that this is how the result would play out, and people shouldn't be surprised.
Yes, and you know, in the weeks ahead of the election, the media outlets were warning of this, right? You would see in effect a red mirage in many states, also a blue one. And what that means is that in a lot of the states, as you saw on election night, for a long time, Virginia looked red, Texas looked blue. Virginia then started counting mail-in ballots. That completely reversed the race. Texas also brought in some votes, changing the race. And so more than any election, you needed to expect that votes would be counted, different votes would be counted at different times. And in a lot of the key states, that was engineered that way. You know, there were attempts to change the electoral law to prevent that, which were unsuccessful. And so you have situations where the mail-in ballot gets counted last. And because of the amount of mail-in ballots, a lot of it from metropolitan areas, that is a very big Democratic vote that's being counted last. And hence why Trump's leads in most of these states is vanishing.
Okay, Ryan, well, thank you very much for joining us on this special show. Thanks in particular for putting your view so clearly that based on your analysis of these projections, you're confident that Biden will effectively win this afternoon. You're going to join us on another special broadcast live later this afternoon. And I urge our viewers to join us then for our latest analysis. But I think you've done what a lot of the pundits and the commentators have been refusing to do because they don't want to be wrong. They don't want to repeat 2016. So thanks very much for giving us that exclusive breaking news here in Europe that on your analysis, on your decision desk, Biden will win. He'll have enough votes by this afternoon. Sorry about all the sirens here in lockdown Brussels, but that's a part of everyday life here, as I'm sure it is in much of Europe and America at the moment. But just thank our viewers. Don't forget to like the show, to share, to comment, maybe put questions for Ryan later today, to subscribe to the channel, and to ring that all-important notification bell. Thanks for tuning in. Tune in a bit later, and take care and have a good day. Goodbye. Thanks, Ryan.